Now we know how to send a GET request, because that's what we're doing here. We're getting data by sending this fetch request to this URL. Now, in reality, in a lot of applications, you don't just want to fetch data. You also want to send data to a server, for example, because a new user was created. That's why I added a new component. And attached you find an updated project snapshot which contains the new addMovie.js and addMovie module CSS files and an adjusted app.js file where I basically now also added this addMovie component here in my JSX code and where I added this addMovieHandler function which just logs the movie. In addMovie, I'm just rendering a form and I'm gathering the user input, preventing the form default, the submission default, and then creating that movie object and passing it on through my prop here, through on addMovie. Therefore, we get this form, and this would allow us to add a movie. Now, the Star Wars API, which we're using here, is really just a dummy API for getting data. We can't send post requests there, which is what we need to do to store new data. But this dummy Star Wars API, of course, is just some API which is there to play around with it. They don't want data to be submitted by anyone out there. So we can't send a post request here. That's why I'll now use another dummy API, another service. And that service is Firebase. Firebase is a service provided by Google, and it's in the end a backend which we can use without writing any code. Unlike the name implies, it's not some kind of database. It's a backend that comes together with a database, but it also gives us a full backend app, a complete REST API to which we can send requests. And the great thing is that we can get started for free here, also if you check their pricing pages, and we can play around with our dummy backend here for free, without writing any server-side code. Since this course is a React course, I of course want to focus on React. And here we will then be able to get data and to store data. For that, you need a Google account, and then you need to go here to the Firebase console after logging in with your Google account. Once you logged in, you can add a new project and give it any name of your choice. Here, I'll name it React HTTP, but the name is up to you. Click continue. You can disable Google Analytics. We don't need them here. And this will now create our Firebase project. Now, again, Firebase is a service offered by Google. It consists of many products and services that make up the overall service, and we will only use a fraction of that. We're not going to build some complex Fire-based app here. I'm just using it because it's a free-to-use, no code needed backend, which we can start with. Now here I'm in the Firebase console, and for us, the real-time database is interesting. Now I did say that Firebase is not just a database, and it isn't. But part of its offerings is a database. They actually have two databases. Cloud Firestore is the more powerful one, but real-time database is the one which is easier to get started with, and since we just want a dummy backend, we'll use that. It also has the nicer REST API. Now once we click here, we can click on Create Database, and then, important, Start in test mode. Otherwise, you will not be able to send requests. Now this sets up a very simple database for you, and it gives you a URL which you can use to talk to that database, though that's deceiving. As I mentioned, our frontend won't directly talk to the database, and it's not doing that here either, even though it might look like it is. In the end, this here is a URL to some Firebase API, some Firebase REST API, which then takes incoming requests and does talk to some other database behind the scenes. It just might look like we're directly sending requests to a database here. Actually, we aren't. Now we can use this URL to send data to our Firebase backend and to our database, therefore. But of course, fetching movies from there won't really succeed. If we go to app.js, we can replace this Star Wars URL with this URL, and then actually add one extra segment here, which is movies.json. Now this name movies in my case is up to you. This basically will then just create a new node in that database, basically. It's a dynamic REST API, which you can configure here by using different segments to store data in different nodes of your database. So this name is up to you, and I choose movies because I want to store some movies. A .json is important here. That's something Firebase specific. They need this .json at the end of the URL you are sending requests to, otherwise your requests will fail. Now we can get our data from there, but if I use this URL, Indeed will fail to get our data. And we actually get an error because I try to read some results which we don't get. We are not making it into this if block here because we're not getting an error response code. We do get a 200 response code, but we won't have our results in there. We won't get any data at all. Of course, because currently we're not storing any data here. Now I did switch to this real-time database and to Firebase so that we can send post requests and that we can store data, because that's also something you often gotta do, and that's something I wanna show you therefore.